Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Bell to Bells, your women's wrestling wire. I am Mr. Warren Hayes, and we are continuing all of our wonderful talks and chats and interviews over this great weekend that we are having for the women's 150 list celebration of women's wrestling. We're piggybacking is what we're doing. And look at who I have joining me right here today, the gladiator of the geeks herself, Riley Shepard. Riley, hello, and welcome to Bell to Bells.
Thank you for having me back again. I'm so excited to geek out.
I am too, because we're sort of breaking the formula a little bit. You know, we're not going to talk about dumb stuff like where'd you train wrestling and who's your favorite wrestler.
We covered those basics already.
We're already done. Our relationship goes beyond that now.
Yeah.
Riley, the reason we're having you on, outside of the fact that you're wonderful and just an amazing person to chat with, is you are a passionate, I guess. You are a passionate LARPer, right? So straight off the bat, this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about live action role playing is what LARP stands for you noobs out there. Would you start with the basics? Tell us what LARPing is all about.
So like you said, it is live action role playing. I got into it back in college, and the way it was explained to me was, do you want to go in the woods, dress up, and hit people? That was literally how I was going through a really bad breakup. And my friend came to me with this and went, okay, this is what is it? And I'm like, do I need to know more about this? He's like, no, I'll walk you through it. But that's exactly how it was explained to me. And basically that's kind of what it was.
Okay, all right.
There is a bit more to it. There is where I go, I actually LARP or used to LARP at Mystic Realms Evermore, Glory of Guildhall, and that's in New Jersey. And they do have a rule book. They do have races and classes. So I don't know if anyone's played like RPGs like Dragon Age, Mass Effect, anything like that, where you create your character. It's very similar to that, where you get to choose your race and your class. You get to choose your name. You get to pretty much build this whole entire character around that.
Right.
And you start out as a noob with very little points to put anywhere, but wherever you do, you put it in like certain skills.
Sure.
So when I was LARPing, I was a deep elf rune caster. So a lot of it went to like the runes, which was magic.
Mm-hmm.
I would do things for like healing or even offense. I was very much a frontline fighter. So I have only gone to this LARP, and I don't know if other ones are set up, but it was an entire weekend you would go for, and you would camp out, and you would go on Friday, you'd set your stuff up, and then they'd say game on. And from that point on until Sunday, when they said game over, you were your character.
Right.
Whoever you were and they had PC characters and they had NPC characters, the playable characters or the non-playable characters, which, when you do all of the skill points, it was for a PC character. I actually loved being an NPC because the entire weekend I got to be different characters. Because the way they had it, they had it all set up where you would do trails, and some combat, some puzzles, things like that. You go on different trails in different areas on Friday with different NPC characters. And then the next day, those same NPC characters would either be something different or the same kind of vein to just progress the story. Leading into Saturday night was the final battle. Everything came to
like a Braveheart kind of situation.
Came to a head, and you were fighting the PCs and the NPCs. So when I NPC'd, I was anything from like a villager, Glory of Guildhall, to an ant.
So you had to have some kind of range, right? You have to be able to do all sorts of stuff. Now, here's a little inside baseball, okay? A little behind the scenes thing. When we reached out to you, like when Kristen and I, Kristen, editor-in-chief of Bell to Bells, hello Kristen, how you doing? When we were discussing ideas, right? I was like, why don't we talk to Riley and see, what maybe she'd be interested in doing something like related to Dungeons and Dragons, RPGs, you know? And Kristen reaches out and you're like, I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like,
I
well,
did for a little bit, for like a smidgen during COVID.
okay. But well, you see, it's still fairly recent and you were
Yeah.
LARPing beforehand. And in my experience, because I've dabbled, we'll talk about it. Well, in my experience, usually you sort of move on from tabletop gaming to LARPing.
Yeah, which is probably why it didn't quite work out.
Yeah, exactly. So in your experience, do you like how many people just dive right into LARPing as opposed to, and how easy is it to dive into LARPing without having ever really played, you know, Dungeons and Dragons or the like?
So I definitely feel like you have to have someone in your life who's like, hey, this is a thing, in order for you to actually get into it. Kind of like wrestling is that same thing.
Sure.
Like you,
Okay.
most people, when they tell the story, they're like, oh, my family member watched it, or oh, so-and-so did it, or whatever. You have some sort of, and LARPing is such a small community, even smaller than wrestling. Obviously, it's not as broadly based. So you definitely have to have someone in your life who's like, hey, this is actually a thing for you to understand that this is going on. I have always, you know, read science fiction books or played Zelda or Final Fantasy or Pokemon. I only had Game Boy at that time until I finally graduated to an Xbox. So I do have a background of like, I've been geeky my entire life. So it wasn't really like outside of the realm of things to be like, hey, and then obviously going through a tough time, like add in that I get to play a character, be someone completely in a different fantasy world, completely different to what was going on, escape my world for a little bit for a weekend and become this new character and hit people.
the hitting people seems important. Yeah.
Right. So and then after I did LARPing for a while, that same friend was like, hey, he ended up becoming my roommate, and he had D&D groups. And he would have his friends over and he's like, do you want to try it? And I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And I sat down. I'm like, okay, so you roll and then you go, I hit you. And I'm like, I feel like I want to actually hit you. This is a little, we started very aggressive and now we're like, it's not quite as interactive.
You're pulling me back now. It's like I'm not actually wailing on people here.
Yeah, so it just was one of those things that maybe if I had started with D&D and graduated to LARPing, I would have gotten into D&D so much more and so much earlier. Because that's, like you said, what most people do. They start with a tabletop and then they progress to very interactive. And I did the opposite. But I did over COVID have a group that got together and I got to learn some of the D&D and trying to learn it on Roll20, which is an online database for it, was fun. Unfortunately, with COVID opening up, everyone went back to their adulting lives and I only got a few weeks of it, but I'd love to still do it.
Right on.
Yeah.
No, but because that's it. Because like I did it for a bit. I did a lot of tabletop gaming. I did like Dungeons and Dragons, and I played the Palladium games and the GURPS. I played one that I find no one ever remembers called Torg, but no one remembers. Yeah, it was really fun. But I'm not going to get into it. But
yeah,
but I mean, like
we'll geek out about that another
moment. Yeah, something where, you know, people will be like, oh, okay, skip. No, but so, and probably I think my really last love of tabletop gaming, I got into the World of Darkness universe, Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, and all those, right?
Yeah.
And it just so happens that White Wolf, who were publishing the vampire games at the time, created a LARPing system for Vampire.
Yes, I did try that actually once.
You did?
Yeah.
Now, okay, so I have to ask, right? Did you play? What was it? The rules with the paper rock scissors? Was it the paper rock scissors rules, or
no?
Because they evolved it over the years.
Okay, yeah, it still was a good maybe like 10 years ago that I tried it.
Right.
So I don't recall a lot of it. And like I said, it was only for one night. I didn't stick with it. Like Glory of Guildhall, I really enjoyed that aspect a little bit more than I felt Vampire. But yeah, I it was interesting, and I love it. I like read so many vampire books growing up and still. So I was really excited to learn about it, but I think I just really enjoyed Guildhall so much more, and that's
Sure.
kind of where I kept going.
And that's understandable. No, the system was like there was no the system was set up for everyone's safety, so there
Yeah.
wasn't any contact, like as opposed
Yes.
to what we see with fantasy LARPing, where everyone has the big
Buffer
broadswords
weapons
and
or camisole. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
everything was sort of settled with rock paper scissors, and it was a terrible system. It was terrible. So
Yeah, I think it was very much more a political game is how I felt when
yes,
I got into it, which I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, but I also was never really good at politicking ever.
look,
So it wasn't just in my realm of yeah.
it was a good opportunity to go hang out, at the local watering hole,
Yeah.
who had, who were hosting these events for us. They were very good about it.
Yeah.
So you just go around in your costume and you hang around and you say stupid stuff while drinking beer. That's
Which I think actually Community did an episode on that. I don't know if you've ever watched Community, and they did a vampire
Oh,
episode.
really? Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. They were like trying to get this bauble from the highest. Yeah, it was interesting to see it after I had actually done it.
Oh,
Like,
Lord.
oh.
I'd probably cringe because I'd be like, oh, that was me, kind of thing.
You gotta embrace it.
Yeah, you have to embrace it. I agree. So, but you're like, you're into the fantasy aspect of it, right? Do you like your gear yourself? Did you come up with it? Do you make it yourself? Like,
So I'm not that artsy craftsy to be able to
okay,
make
no,
it myself, but I do definitely take from different iterations of my sci-fi geekdom. So I don't know if anyone ever like pays attention to when someone announces me. I am billed from Mystic Realms Evermore, which is the LARP that I used to be.
there's the connection. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. So that's definitely part of it. I definitely have taken my very first iteration was kind of more of elf homage. It ended up actually looking more like Link. My gear ended up looking a little more like Link than the natural elf, like because it was earthy green and brown tones and things like that. But I have always said I'm an elf because that's what I've always played. Whenever I've played Dragon Age or LARPed or anything like that, I've always played an elf because that's kind of
You feel the
my
connection
thing.
to the elf.
Yeah, I have a connection to it very much so. So that was definitely something that I've always had in. And then the armor that I wear has like elvish writing on it, but that's more Lord of the Rings, but it also goes back to LARPing and the elf race too. So it's kind of just little bits and pieces have built up my character for sure.
Sure.
Oh, and my sword
I
is
was
a
going to say.
my sword is a LARPing sword. How can I forget that? So yes, my sword is actually a LARPing sword. It's a camisole sword that I've
Camisole.
actually, yeah.
What is camisole?
That's the material that it's made with.
Oh,
So
okay.
when I LARPed, it was actually a boffer weapon, and my very first iteration of my Riley Shepard shirts, which you can still buy at What a Maneuver, has two boffer weapons crossing
Gotcha.
behind a shield. But I actually liked the look of the other swords a little bit better, and that's what I carry to the ring all the time is one of those. But it is the LARPing sword.
So it is the LARPing sword,
Yes.
and you have like that's the cool thing, right? It's like you just said it yourself, like your whatever you did in LARPing, when your LARPing experience helped craft your in-ring persona at the same time, right? That's really cool. Interesting, also, well, let me ask you the question. You said like a lot of people get into LARPing just to disconnect for that weekend, and be other people, be someone else. And
Right.
do you feel like there's that kind of tie-in with actually being a wrestler, like when it's time to perform?
I think it definitely is. Maybe some characters more than others, because in the same way that LARPing, you have these really really good actors in LARPing who like are a completely different character from who they are outside of LARPing, and you talk to them outside of it and you're like, oh, that's very like he's an orc. He's an orc in Glory of Guildhall, and he's like this very even tone, kind of more introvert. But when he's in the game, because you're surrounded by like-minded people, it just and who you're not being judged by to
Sure.
be this geeky, you kind of become a different persona, or you feel more comfortable becoming that different persona, and you're also able to escape the world. And the other part of it that to me, I feel like it's just kind of been a running theme in my life is just storytelling. Storytelling in LARPing is so important. It's something that with Guildhall every month they actually write this whole intro to what that weekend's going to be like, set up the story of what you're going through for the weekend.
Sure.
And then what happens over the weekend progresses for the next month. And so in the same way that we talk about storylines with wrestling and progressing to different battles and progressing to the final feud or the final battle or things like that, that's very similar with LARPing too, is all of these characters are getting together to progress the storyline. And that includes the character that you made. Mm-hmm. And what would your character do in this situation? How would your character react in this situation? And that's the same with wrestling. A lot of us create this persona, create this character, and how would my character, not who I am outside of the ring, how would my character react in the ring to this? And progressing storylines in that way too, and building up a character. And for me with wrestling, storyline has always been so important. Like, why did you do this? Always why. Why did you do this? What was your motivation? What was going to happen next? Like things like that. And I think just because I've grown up since a very young age of reading books and then playing even my video games are RPGs, they're all story based, and then LARPing and then wrestling, like there's a very common theme of I like stories.
Sure.
It's just the same.
Okay, well, I can definitely see the connections there. Look, would you say, like, the last time that I was actually LARPing and whatnot? Look, we're talking in the 90s, right? What can I tell you? I'm old. What am I gonna do? And there was very much, even over tabletop gaming, right? Very much a stigma, it was, the nerds, stop reading books, nerd, go outside, nerd kind of thing. Do you feel like there's some kind still of stigma around LARPing today? Or do you feel, because, look, let's be honest, the geeks have taken over, right? Like,
yes.
We're
it's definitely cooler to be a geek now.
We're everywhere now.
That's when I got bullied for it.
Yeah, exactly. You're like... So do you feel that there's still a stigma, or do you feel like it's a little more accepted? Or tell me about it. Tell me about the perception of LARPing.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like there's still also a stigma for wrestling. I mean, people talk about their stories, and like I used to get made fun of all the time for watching wrestling, and now I do it. But yeah, there's definitely a stigma for LARPing, and I do have to say that, like, when I go, it's a lot of people who normally would be introverts or people who might sit to the side because they feel like they don't fit in or things like that. And then they get together for this LARP, and there's just a bunch of us misfits doing this together. And that was the other part of it that was beautiful about LARPing, was we could all be misfits together and no one would judge us about it. So there's definitely a very big stigma. And even like, I've brought it up to other wrestlers too, of like, hey, I LARP, and they would be like, you nerd. I'm like, well, it's geek. First of all, it's geek. Second of all, you're all LARPers too. So
right.
And then when I explain it, they're like, oh, now I want to LARP. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Could you imagine?
Cool.
You know what? I hope Megan Bain never came up to you and said nerd for LARPing, because they're like, Megan, excuse me. Have you seen your gear?
Right.
But
that's the thing, is it's so funny that until you get into it, you kind of judge it. But then when you explain it and break it down, you're like, we're all very geeky, and we all have that one thing that makes our a little geeky heart like beat.
Sure.
And that LARPing is it for them. or was for me, and wrestling is it for us. We're so into the wrestling world, but people who aren't in it probably think we're all geeks
Yeah,
for
no,
being in
for
it.
real. No, but I can look. I mean, I get it for on both sides. And look,
Yeah.
it's even. Trust me, it's somewhat a little weirder when someone asks you, "Hey, what's your podcast about?" And then you're like, "Well, pro wrestling," and they're kind of like,
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan, and yeah, well, yeah, yes, and
Yes.
they're sort of like, it's fake, right? All right, never mind.
Yeah.
How's the what great weather we're having, kind of thing. You just change the subject, but yeah, it's absolutely right.
Right.
It's always that's the core of it all, really. Just finding
Yeah.
something to connect with other people and being able to connect. That's
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Let's say someone came up to you and said, I want to get into this, but what, what would you say to someone who's interested in it, but maybe is a little weary? What would you tell them?
Do it. No, I'm kidding.
That's the interview, everyone. Thank you.
Well, that's kind of what it is, though, is okay, what's holding you back? Is it the fact that you feel like you'll be judged for it? Because if you go, I promise you no one there is going to judge you for wanting to LARP, because they're all doing it too. And I think the biggest part is it takes very creative and artistic people to LARP and to wrestle, because like most of these LARPers are creating their clothing, they're creating their outfits, they're creating a character. And a lot of the most misunderstood people are artistic or creative people, because some people don't get it.
Sure.
So for me, it would just be like, okay, I went here, this is my experience, and break it down for them. I do have a friend who is really good at the rules and can be your guru through it if you want to do it. But the biggest thing is, okay, find a place that you are interested in doing and going to, and just do it. Bring a friend if it makes you feel better, someone who's interested possibly in checking it out, so you have a buddy. But have someone there too who's willing to like walk you through as a newbie, which they always do. They'll have like the Friday night before, if someone's new, they'll sit down and they'll explain like the basics to you and things like that. But it's nice to have someone throughout the weekend be like, okay, and check in with you. Sure. And just be like, hey, are you good in like the tents, because you can't really do it on the trails, but check in with you. But yeah, just connect with someone who's into LARPing, bring a buddy along, bring a group along, and just do it.
Just try it out. Sure, for sure.
Yeah.
How different is LARPing for men versus women?
I feel like it's really funny. It's so different from wrestling, because in wrestling it's still majority men.
Sure.
So it's still very much a men's world, men's locker room. Where I was LARPing, it wasn't like that. It was very equal. There were just as many men, women, queer people, just as many, and it was never a thing. It was the only thing that ever mattered was in game. If there are certain races that were looked down upon, so they acted like they looked down upon it, but it had absolutely nothing to do with your gender. So there was never anything that I ran into along that. I'm sure there are cases of people being, jerks, but I've luckily never seen it. And that's never been an issue. It's never something that became an issue, because the only thing you picked was your race and your class, and that's how you were portrayed, and that's how people acted towards you.
So there you go. Well, that's pretty cool. How hard do you hit people? Because this is a thing for you. No, but I mean, we're gonna, you keep we go out into the woods and we swing at each other. It's like, how hard do you hit people, Riley?
I mean, so there are definitely no zones. You're not allowed to hit, otherwise, they have a countdown. Yeah.
What's a no zone? The head, probably.
Well, don't hit in the head. Don't hit below the waist in certain areas, things like that. Otherwise, if you do hit, you kind of like have to pause for a second.
Okay.
But you're not out there to hurt each other. And people will tell you if you are hitting too hard, like maybe take a step back, whatever else, because you're not. You're kind of there. And then there's other, like, there's swords, but there's also bows and arrows where they have little satchels, and they'll throw the little satchels, and that's and hit
Okay.
them with that too. So there's a bunch of different things, but yeah, you're not going out there to actually behead people or take them out. They have hit points that
Yes.
they have to. It's very much based on being truthful and being like, okay, I was hit.
Yeah.
Okay, I have this many hit points. Some people might be able to keep track a little bit more, but most people have to be truthful, and it's just honesty, you know.
You're just on good faith with everyone at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The it's the I'm sure you've seen like all sorts of different costumes and setups and getups. What's the coolest like LARPing gear you've seen, or maybe that you've owned as well?
So when I went LARPing, I didn't have really cool gear. I definitely just had, a Halloween costume that I bought. It was actually a vampire Halloween costume that I bought and I used as more that, but I'm not very artsy craftsy. I can't make my own gear.
Sure.
But there are definitely people there. Like there was a guy who was an orc and he had these big shoulder pads and this whole get up, and he was painted all green. There's that one was really cool. I also like they have a woman who was a bard, and she just had very colorful gear and just layer upon layer upon layer. And you're like, oh my gosh, how many different colorful things do you have on? And like you can't look away because it's so colorful. But yeah, a bunch of the people there are just really good at sewing and really good at all of that artsy stuff, and it's cool to see. And that they'll like spend a month or so building these outfits
Sure,
to be the
at the
character.
same.
So it's cool. But yeah, those are probably the ones that I can recall that were like really cool.
And for the rest of us, we wait till Spirit Halloween pops up, and then we go raid as
Right?
much as we
Yeah,
can.
that's pretty much what I did.
That's what I
did
did.
that, or like they always tell the newbies, if you don't have anything to wear a black top and a black pants. So I was always one running around in a black tank top and black leggings with black boots because I'm like, man, this is easy. So that was sometimes what I wore.
I'm assuming with the COVID everything last year, there wasn't much going on. Have you dipped your toe back into? Have you LARPed since COVID? No, not really.
No, I haven't. I actually haven't been able to LARP for a few years now, between wrestling taking up a lot of the weekends. And
Wait,
that's when Mystic roams.
are you telling me that you've never refused a booking to go LARPing?
I wish. One of these times I might actually have to do it, because like before you know it, years have passed and you're like, I've been saying I want to go back, and I really want to take a group of wrestlers, because I feel like that would be so much fun just to take a group of people to go and introduce them to it, and go for an entire weekend, and it can be like a bonding experience.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that'd be great. I'm sure, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I haven't been back. I know Mystic Realms just started going back recently.
Okay.
And just had an event recently. So they just opened, I think, the last couple of months. So, yeah.
Well, so hopefully, maybe give him a call and say, hey, how about some weekend dates? Yeah. Some dates over the week. It's like, well, what about a Wednesday thing? Kind of.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to change their entire schedule just for me.
Oh, well,
unfortunately. And most LARPers aren't like young kids. They are normally like maybe high school, but college age and up.
Right.
Who go. So they have, adult lives normally during the week. So, and then kind of like us, we have our adult lives during the week, and then we turn into the persona on the weekend.
On the weekend.
To go fight people.
Well, it's probably for the best. Maybe at this point with all your wrestling training, you'd probably like be, get them into headlocks, and then next thing you know, you're suplexing fools.
Have them tapping out.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no, that wasn't part of this. It's not what you're allowed to do.
Yeah, just you go in and you ask, are Kimoras part of the rules? Can we do this? Look, this was a really fun chat, Riley. Thank you so much for taking some time to do it. Something different at the same time. It was a lot of fun, but we're definitely excited to see you back in wrestling and WWR Plus beyond. Get her up on the main show, damn you. Why don't you let people know why don't you let people know where to follow you, what you got coming up to at the same time?
Yeah, so I actually have a really big battle coming up November 6th at Goddesses of War, Titans Champions of Wrestling. It's going to be an Iron Woman match for the Goddesses of War Shiny.
Oh.
And this has been an ongoing, very vicious, very long. I'm going to get that shiny. I've been fighting tooth and nail for it. So that'll be
as a Pokemon player, you probably want it doubly, right?
very much
Right.
doubly. And I really, one of these times, I really just want someone, I want to hold up the championship after I win and someone to play the music from Zelda.
Da, 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 da. Yeah.
Yes, so badly, so badly. So I have that coming up. I also am back at Intergender Bonanza November 20th and Titans Championship again. I am back at Dropkick Depression.
Oh,
They're
cool.
coming back. Yeah, which I'm very excited for. That'll be November 13th.
Shout out to
And
Tara.
yes, oh my gosh. And by the way, Tara has been doing amazing things with Dropkick
She
Depression
really
and
has.
Rain for the sexual assault program, which is actually also coming up in November. If you haven't signed up and you're a wrestler, ref, anything to do with wrestling, please sign up because we very much need a caveat. Sorry.
No, so that's
Distraction.
absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Kristen's already signed up for it as well. So.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, me
Yes.
too. So I'm very excited that that's in the works. But I will be back at Dropkick Depression. We're finally back for that.
Awesome.
And I'll be at Blitzkrieg tomorrow.
Okay.
I will be at Blitzkrieg again in November too for RetroCon, which I've never wrestled at a con before, which be surprised. But I'm so excited. I'm so excited to wrestle at a con.
Well,
If you get
that's
a con.
exciting. Yeah, it's kind of like the merging of the universes here, right?
Yes. If I could ever, my one goal, I've actually never been to Comic-Con either. I've only been to PAX. But if anyone ever runs a wrestling show at Comic-Con, please have the Gladiator of the Geeks on it.
I
Write myself.
yeah. It just writes itself.
Yes.
It just writes itself.
So that's all that's coming up for November. Kind of a busy November.
Good.
And then on social media, I'm still at the Riley Shepard, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as I have What a Maneuver for all of my shirts, including my Boffer weapon shirt that's up there. And just Google What a Maneuver and Riley Shepard.
There you go. Get that merch out there as well. Thank you so much for all of that. Thank you so much, Riley. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I don't know why we waited so long to chat again. We got to do this again soon.
Yes, especially thank you so much for geeking out and gushing with me. I love it. It's always my favorite thing to do. So anytime.
Fantastic. We'll have you on again. Thank you so much and looking forward to everything. Thank you for taking part in our day today. And thank you everyone for watching and listening, whatever you did. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. You know the thing. I'm Mr. Warren Hayes, and I'll see you next time.